You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, and we're into a new year, and we're into our second 100 episodes of BioTalk, and no better way to start that than with a serial entrepreneur who has been a prominent player in the BioHealth Capital Region for over 3 decades. And a lot of you know Bill Enright, but Bill is on his latest journey, which is a cross-Atlantic journey. And he is the CEO of Vaccitech, a UK headquartered company, but has a strong relationship with Maryland and the BioHealth Capital Region. So we're very anxious to talk to Bill today. We haven't had a chance to catch up with him for a few years, and I know a lot has happened. So, Bill, welcome to BioTalk.
Thanks, Rich. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And we go back a long way, and it goes even back further than just Bill and I, because Bill's wife, Renee, was one of the first people to help get biohealth innovation started, and that was over 10 years ago. And so she was really one of the primary players that was familiar with the region to orient me into what was going on in this area. And Bill, I appreciate everything Renee did to help BHI get established.
She was your chauffeur for a while, I think, when you were trying to get around the area.
You mean driving Miss Daisy, right? No, she was much more than a chauffeur based on her knowledge and what she did to help support. But a lot of people know you, but there's a lot of people tuning into the podcast that I'd like to have you introduce yourself. So why don't you give a little background on your history and sort of how you evolved in this industry, Bill?
Thanks. And as Rich said, I've been over 30 years in the biotech space in the Maryland area. I moved down here in 1989 for a job with what was at the time Gibco BRL or Life Technologies that has since evolved to Thermo Fisher. And that's where I really got this entrepreneurial bug, to be honest. So I had an opportunity when I was with them to join. They had incubator companies within the larger organization. And so they would set up these small companies, including manufacturing, marketing, research, and target an area and trying to gain market share in this life science space. And I was associated with one of those incubators. Decided I really liked the business side of science, and so went back to Johns Hopkins, got my business degree, and then moved into business roles within Life Technologies. And when they get taken over and most of the group was consolidated out in California, I decided not to move out there, even though I had a nice offer for personal reasons. Spent some time consulting, and decided that that wasn't really my thing, that I like being inside of companies, and got an offer at Genvec in their business development group. And so spent almost 7 years with Genvec, which had just gone public when I joined them. Ended up as the head of business development for Genvec, and then got an offer to become CEO of a company at the time was called Vaccitech, is now called Altimmune, which was a spin out of the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And it was a really interesting opportunity in a space that I knew pretty well in the vaccines, using viral delivered vectors intranasally, and took that opportunity. And then that was in 2008. So I joined the company in June, and everything went to hell in a handbasket in October on my first non-deal roadshow as a first-time CEO. So it was indoctrination by fire. But eventually turned that around, moved that company up to Maryland, was able to get that company public through a reverse merger in May of 2017. And after a little over 10 years there, decided it was in really good shape. We had raised a bunch of money and we had some solid clinical results, and decided to step down from that position and to see what was next. And got an opportunity with Vaccitech and decided to take that leap. And interesting, as you mentioned, it's an Oxford, UK-based company. So commuting across the pond on a regular basis before and after COVID here, as the situation allows anyhow. And really fortunate to get involved in this company when I did. So I joined in August of 2019. And in January, COVID hit. And Vaccitech has a very interesting technology platform that allowed us to move really, really quickly with a COVID-19 vaccine that we worked with Oxford University, and then ultimately through the university licensed that to AstraZeneca, and now has distributed over 2.5 billion doses of that vaccine around the world. So that really kind of put us on the map and allowed us to take Vaccitech public. I guess it was April of last year.
Pretty interesting journey. And what's really interesting is everything that you've done has had some connection to this area, especially in the Maryland BioHealth Capital Region. And you've had a chance to watch this region evolve over the last 30 years. And before we do a deeper dive into Vaccitech, talk a little bit about what it was like back in the 80s and 90s in Maryland, and while this industry was in its infancy, and what's happened to get it to where it is today.
There's been a huge transition in the biotech space in this area over that 30 years. Even when I joined Life Technologies, it was always we're number 4 or number 5 or number 3, depending on which metric you look at. But how can we continue to grow this, and how can we develop that? And it really has taken on a life of its own lately. And I think that came with some acquisitions that were done, MedImmune getting bought by AstraZeneca. You get the big pharma players coming in, you get new management teams coming in, and then finding the niche for the area. We've really kind of developed into this vaccine, cell therapy, immuno-oncology kind of area where there's a lot of those companies located in this area. And not quite sure how that all came together, but we certainly have a critical mass of those type of companies. And I think that's really, it helps build on itself over time. And so it's really grown and developed over that time period.
And I think you're one of the examples of one of the things that's part of the transformation, because if you look at Boston, San Diego, San Francisco, you have venture capital, you have commercialization, you have serial entrepreneurs, you have spin-outs from big companies. That really wasn't happening over the last 10, 15 years ago. But right now, we're seeing more of that, which is sort of symptomatic of what you see in the leading regions in the United States. And also, there's a great deal of expertise and experience that resides in this region. We used to be an R&D region, but now we're actually becoming a commercialization, manufacturing, distribution region, which is necessary if you're going to continue to go up those rankings, as you say, Bill.
We still have room to grow there. There's a lot of room to continue to develop that. We still are an R&D region. There's a lot of small companies here that are really focused on R&D. NIH, NIST, all the universities that are here really spin out a lot of very interesting technologies. We still need to bring in more of the VC capital. We don't have local VCs. They don't like to be more than a train ride away usually. And we've got some, but that area needs to continue to grow and develop as well.
I agree. And you probably had to experience some of that as you were raising capital to help grow Vaccitech. So let's talk a little bit more about Vaccitech. How did you get connected to them? What was it that attracted you to doing it? And then what embodied them to hire somebody in the United States to run a UK company?
It was kind of a fortuitous event, to be honest. A friend of mine was looking at a CEO position over in Oxford. He was a UK national and had spent some time in the US, so we had worked together, and he asked me to be a reference. At the end of the reference, the recruiter said, "So what are you doing?" And we had this conversation, and she said, "I think I might have something for you." That was that. So when I joined Vaccitech, I was looking for a couple of different things. I had 30 years in the industry, and where can I put that 30 years to use? Where can I be helpful? The second thing was corporate culture, because I'm a big believer in building and growing a transparent, pretty flat organization, work hard, play hard kind of spirit. And so the corporate culture was really important to me. And the group that was there, the company actually started in 2016 as a spin out from Oxford, but really didn't get off the ground until 2018, where they started hiring people and those things. So it was fairly new. The CEO that was there was building a very similar culture. He was living in Oxford, but he was a US CEO. He'd actually spent some time here in the Maryland area as well as CEO of Eris. We had interacted in the past, but didn't really know each other. And then the other thing was, from a product perspective, do they have technologies that I could get behind? Because obviously, as a CEO, one of my primary roles is to sell, and selling a promise of that we're going to be able to develop this technology into meaningful products that are going to impact patients' lives. And they had a product platform that I knew and believed is going to work, still believe that. And we've shown that now with the COVID-19 vaccine. And it kind of met the criteria that I had for looking for a new role. The US placement is an interesting discussion, because I think initially they wanted a US person, but they wanted them to live in Oxford. My kids are in high school. That wasn't an easy transition. And so we agreed to commuting. And I spent a lot of time in New York and San Francisco and talking to analysts and bankers and potential investors. And so it works out pretty well. I do spend about 25 to 50% of my time in the UK when I'm allowed to travel, or when they allow people in the UK to go into the office these days. So it's a lot of fun. I don't mind the travel, and we're building a really nice organization.
Congratulations on that transition, Bill. You've had to go through fundraising for many companies in your 30 years within the region, and it's never easy. Talk a little bit about the financing experience and challenges you had with Vaccitech and why it actually ended up being successful.
It's funny, it's 2.5 years that I've been with the organization, and it's probably 3 different companies during that time period. And we're kind of turning the next chapter, as I'm sure we'll talk about with our recent acquisition. But when I joined the company, they had 2 phase 2 trials going on in flu. They were being done in Australia, and those trials ultimately failed, didn't show significance. And it was kind of a unique approach. It wasn't really a prophylactic approach. It was utilizing the technology in combination with prophylactic to improve performance. And it was a hypothesis that didn't prove out to be correct. And I joined, and we started raising funds immediately. Then the phase 2 failure happened, but that happened in January, just as COVID started. And so the conversation quickly switched from a failed flu trial to now we've got a COVID vaccine. So that was quite helpful. And it was a COVID story initially until we did the out license to AstraZeneca. Then that happened, and now we're a revenue story. We got potential royalty stream from AstraZeneca, in addition to the therapeutic programs that we're really trying to advance. Now, we've got a great technology that stimulates a high magnitude and very robust T cell response. We're really focused on these therapies where we think T cells are going to be important to treating diseases.
What's really interesting as you talk about your relationship with AZ is that you've got a UK company. It's 4,500 employees in Gaithersburg, Maryland, in that region. So it's coincidental, I think, unless it was strategic, but this relationship of AZ being here and then AZ being a key player with you over in the UK, it's really serendipity. And how has that partnership with AZ been, and a small emerging company working with a big multi-billion-dollar biopharma? Talk a little bit about that experience.
So this was really a financial transaction, to be honest. It really wasn't a strong collaboration. We were working with the University of Oxford in the development of this. So we did the initial constructs and some of the initial work. And then when we realized that we really had a high likelihood that this vaccine was going to work, getting a large pharma player involved to reduce manufacturing commercialization risks made a lot of sense. And so we talked to a number of folks, and AstraZeneca ended up being the winner here. And the way this worked is we actually licensed our technology back to the university, and they did the exclusive license with AstraZeneca. So they're still working on some of the new constructs and things and doing that work in combination with AstraZeneca. For us, it's really, once the transaction was done, we have no expenses or time commitments related to further development of the vaccine in exchange for the financial assets that we're going to get.
No, it's interesting, and I didn't understand the dynamics here, but generally, once the license occurs from the university to the company, The university's generally out of it. They just want to clip their coupons and get their royalties. But all of a sudden, what you've just described is it's going back to the university. There's a relationship now between AZ and Oxford again. And so it's something that benefits all three parties involved in their own unique ways in which they work together.
No, absolutely. I think the university's benefited tremendously from that, and we've benefited tremendously from that. And I think the world has benefited tremendously from that, because our ultimate goal there was to see how quickly we could get as much vaccine to as many people as possible. Because if you remember back in early 2020, lots of people were dying. Some people are still dying, but lots of people were dying back then, and without any kind of treatments available. And that was really the goal, is just let's see how quickly we can get as much stuff out to people as possible.
This might be something that I just thought about and wasn't something I was going to talk about, but do you know Dr. James Crow in Vanderbilt?
I don't actually.
But I think he helped develop some of the monoclonal antibodies related to the AZ vaccine. But he's the lead scientist for the Global Pandemic Prevention and Biodefense Center, which now is going to be headquartered at U.S. Pharmacopoeia over in Rockville. And he's at Vanderbilt. But it's amazing how it's like 1 or 2 degrees of separation for anybody in this industry, in this world, who is doing this work that we're all related to right now.
Absolutely. It's a pretty small community.
Yeah. Before we get into something that's the latest transaction for you at Vaccitech, you talked about the COVID and the pandemic. I think the listeners would be interested to know, we know what's going on in the United States, and rather challenging as we speak, but also you have the UK where you've got your primary organization. Talk a little bit about what's going on with COVID and the pandemic over on the UK side, and how do you compare the differences of how it's being managed over there versus the United States?
The COVID outbreak there is pretty similar, I think. It's just a little bit ahead of where we are in the US. So it was very widespread. The Omicron variant, or Omicron, depending on how you say it, targeting very widespread, even vaccinated individuals, fully boosted individuals, or come down with the Omicron version. But fortunately, at least most of the people I know that have gotten COVID since then, both in the UK and here, fully vaccinated folks are much milder symptoms. So you're spending a lot less time in the hospital. If you're going to the hospital at all, a lot less time, or a lot fewer patients in the ICU. So I think the issue, though, is you're still overwhelming the healthcare systems, not only because you've got so many people out with the virus, so you've got doctors and nurses that are out and support staff that are out, but just number-wise, the peak is a lot higher. And so just pure numbers game, you're overwhelming the healthcare system. And so folks that are in car accidents or having heart attacks or other things are having trouble getting treated. And that's hugely problematic. And 2 years in here, it's really taking a physical and mental toll on our healthcare system. That's the real issue.
Yeah, and basically, I think that what you're explaining, the challenges are very similar there as they are here in the United States. I mean, we all have common problems that have to be addressed. Let's talk about something that's positive right now that is really exciting for Vaccitech and for the region and for entrepreneurs here to look at, is that you announced a acquisition of a company in December from Maryland. And coincidentally, the company Avidia was one of the first companies that BioHealth Innovation took on as a client when we were creating, and one of our entrepreneurs in residence, Ram Ayar, was involved with Avidia and working with their CEO, Jeff Lynn. So congratulations on your acquisition of Avidia. And let's talk in any way you would like to about how it evolved, what it brings to Vaccitech, and what you're looking for in the future out of them.
Ram, I guess, was instrumental here. So he made an introduction to me, to the company, prior to me joining Vaccitech. And I spent a couple of months consulting with them in a BD kind of role and helping them shape some of the messages and things like that. And then Vaccitech happened and I joined Vaccitech. But the technology really intrigued me. I really liked the team, and I liked the science, and I liked what they were doing. And then after joining Vaccitech, we raised almost $280 million last year in a Series B, and then the IPO. That allowed me to think a little bit about what's out there, what can we add to what we have going on, and how we can continue to grow the company how we can establish a U.S. footprint, and showed the technology to our science team. They got pretty intrigued with that as well. And we decided to make an acquisition. It's really interesting science. It's peptide nanoparticle, self-assembling nanoparticle technologies. So it's very complementary to what we're doing. Again, the way Vaccitech was formed is you hear all about the mix and match vaccines and how those work better. That's really the premise behind Vaccitech. We've known this for 10 or 15 years now. Our scientific founders at the University of Oxford had been doing this for that long, where you're priming, you're giving the first boost to the immune system with one kind of viral vector and then coming back with a second one. And it really gives you a much higher response. Your immune system really takes a jump. And so with this new technology platform, it allows us to add that to the mix. So we have a couple of our own viral vectors. We've got new viral vectors in development. Now we have a peptide nanoparticle that we can also add to the mix. But more importantly, they also know how to control this and the size of that particle, and they can deliver other things other than antigens. We can actually target indications that we weren't able to go after before. So, for instance, in the autoimmune space, looking at MS or celiac disease, one of the things that we're looking at very carefully and working with Jeff and his team to get at least 2 of those programs into the clinic in the next 12 to 18 months.
That's pretty exciting. So basically what you're saying is they have a delivery technology which can deliver many different things to treat many different diseases. So that broadens the pipeline opportunities for Vaccitech in the future.
Exactly.
So they're in Baltimore, and basically you have the UK headquarters. So tell me what your plans are from integration. And I would imagine you're pretty happy now that you have an organization located in your backyard that you can travel to in 30 minutes rather than having to get a plane on, which helps justifies more time back in the BioHealth Capital Region.
No, absolutely. That was one of the other considerations, as we're a NASDAQ listed company. And so establishing a US footprint is also important. So having it in Maryland, that's a plus. It wasn't a necessity, but it's definitely a plus. So we're going to continue to grow that organization. We're right now looking at potential new space because the crew in Baltimore are in multiple facilities right now. And so we're looking at consolidating that into a single building and providing enough room for growth. As I said, we've got multiple programs that we're looking at from this technology bringing into the clinic. Some of that will be here in the US. And so bringing on HR and finance and quality and the other things to support, because that team was really, other than a BD guy, that team was really a team of scientists. Jeff was the CEO, but he's a scientist. That's, I think, where his passion is, as well as Andrew. Andrew is the CSO there, and they're very passionate about the science. And I think they're very excited about being able to spend more time doing the science than on running a company and raising capital and the things that I love to do.
Well, thank you for making the commitment to keep them here and growing it within the region, because that's sort of one of the things that's necessary for us to create more jobs within this region that will help us propel our rankings in the future. Not that the rankings are the most important, but you have the job security. You're going to create opportunities for postdocs and quality people here within this region. I know you're very committed to the university sector and trying to work with universities in the way that you do. So we all appreciate your commitment to leaving here. So let's talk a little bit about, you've had a very interesting career path. I guess we both have, because it's interesting how in this industry or other industries, if you have definite skill sets, they can be applied regardless of what company or industry you're in. And I think you're proving that today. So talk a little bit about what your personal and corporate goals are over the next 5 years for Bill Enright. And we're talking with Bill, who's the CEO of Vaccitech, as well as some of your corporate goals over the next 5 years.
Right now, I'm having a tremendous amount of fun with this organization. We've got cash in the bank for a couple of years. We've got 3 phase 2 assets, 2 phase 1 assets, an asset that's been commercialized, a couple of near-term things that are going to be in the clinic very shortly. So there's a lot of work to do to continue to advance those programs. And that's really where the corporate objectives are, is continuing to advance our current programs, move things forward towards commercialization, and then work to commercialize these programs. We're going to try and build an organization that, at least in some of the indications, brings those products to market. From a personal perspective, that's what I'm focused on, Rich, is building this organization, making it better, both on the UK and in the US, and getting those programs to market.
Congratulations on getting to this point. And I know you're somewhat relieved. You've probably been in a perpetual fundraising mode for decades, and having cash in the bank, a public entity that has access to other resources when needed, puts you in a better position to where you can focus on the corporate strategy and not have to worry about every day, how am I going to meet payroll and raise more money for the company.
It's a huge relief, and that's been my life for the last probably decade is right.
We never stop raising money, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, Bill. I'd like to close now. This is really great insights on your career and everything that's evolving with Vaccitech, Avidia, and the region. I give you an open mic. You can chat about anything you'd like to for our listeners here related to you, the company, or the BioHealth Capital Region.
I think this is an exciting place to be. BioHealth Capital Region, I think it's a growing environment. I think we're continuing to recruit the right kind of talent to the area. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to recruit the right kind of capital to the area. We've got great technologies already. We're continuing to develop the management teams necessary and the entrepreneurial mindset to grow these companies and to spin out these companies. So this is a great place to be. From a Vaccitech perspective, it's also a really exciting time for us. We're going to continue to push these things forward in the clinic. We had really promising results with our HPV therapeutic, with our prostate cancer program. And so we're excited both on the therapeutic side and the prophylactic side, where these applications will come in to continue to grow and develop these programs, and ultimately to treat as many people as we can. These technologies are playing out, and the goal is to help people.
I appreciate your perspective for the future, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about another thing personally for you to make our listeners aware of, and that's you actually moved from Buffalo down to come into the region, if I'm not mistaken. And Buffalo is a big hockey and football town, and a lot of people don't know it, but you're still involved in actually playing hockey at your young age. You're a goalie. So talk a little bit about your hockey experience, Bill.
Oh, that's my stress relief, Rich. I love playing hockey. I've been doing it for years. I did it when I was a kid and then took a hiatus for a long time. But with a number of injuries from basketball and soccer, got back into hockey again and just loving it. I play ball hockey. I play roller hockey. I play ice hockey, all as a goalie. Play as much as I can when I'm not on the road. I'm actually a member of a couple different teams. But with my travel schedule, I'm doing mostly subbing it these days. But really enjoy it. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, let's go Bills.
I know.
Second year in a row as AFC East champions. And you got an important game in, I think, single degree temperatures and potential blustery conditions in, I was going to say Rich Stadium, but that just tells you how old I am. Highmark Stadium, I think it's called now.
Since I'm a Steeler and a Chiefs fan, the Patriots have been our nemesis. So we hope the Bills win and that we have an opportunity with one of those teams, which most likely would be the Chiefs that would advance, to have a chance to play against the Bills. So we'll do a little follow-up on that. But Bill, I want to thank you for appearing on BioTalk. Great success story. It also shows that persistence and patience pays off for entrepreneurs within this industry, because a lot of people get defeated and quit, and you've never quit. You always found a way to go forward and improve yourself within this industry, and we're glad that you're still part of this region.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.